Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Nikki Austin is present. Rich Depre.
Present.
Eric Ekdahl.
Present.
Terry Ellison.
Present.
Teresa Keen.
Present.
Cheryl McGuire.
Here.
Dylan McGuire.
Here.
Bill Vosberg. Tim Wolf.
Okay, we have a quorum. We are in session. I'd entertain a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Eric and a second by Nikki. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Consent agenda is next. Does any board member wish to remove an individual item for consideration? Hearing none, we'll read them into the record. We're approving the minutes from the Board of Education for August 22nd, 2022. Approval of professional staff resignation, Elizabeth Struns, middle school guidance counselor. Approval of support staff hiring, Benjamin Figge, district special education driver. Tricia Myers, Monroe High School cafeteria worker. Approval acceptance of community donations, Nancy Sperry. $150 to the Monroe High School Library in honor of the class of 1952's 70th class reunion. Alter Metal Recycling, $248.11 to Backpack Buddies, and Dearth Automotive, $820 to Backpack Buddies. Again, amazing support to Backpack Buddies and from our community. We really appreciate that. I would entertain a motion.
Moved. A second.
And a motion by Nikki and a second by Teresa to approve the consent agenda. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is public comment. Is anybody here for the purpose of making public comment this evening? Hearing no one, we'll move on to old business. Approval of the Public Library Board of Trustee appointment. So this is an item that we tabled a couple of weeks ago, I think, and it has now made it through the approval process on the library board. Did you get to participate in this one, Terry? Do you have any comments?
I didn't. No. She's been a part of the library and the community for quite a few years, so they were very comfortable voting her on.
Okay. I would entertain a motion if somebody would like to make it.
So, I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Terry and a second by Teresa to approve the appointment of Ellen Hossman as Public Library Board Trustee. Additional comments or discussion? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item, we are on to new business. This is a North Side project update. So school has started, and I think Ron and Rich are going to give us a rundown on how far we've come and what we have left to do.
I'll have Rich start with a little bit of where we are with the work that's in progress now, and then I'll talk a little bit about the remaining budget dollars and the recommendations for consideration going forward.
Currently, the roofing is still in the process. They are expecting to be finished on the 21st of September. The doors are ordered and expected to be in for the interior doors on the middle of September, so next week. And then plan on installing them on October 7th. Is, I believe, our day off, and then they'll complete the work on Saturday, the 8th. That's for doors and the lower cabinets. And that is about it for where we're at this point.
Everything else, punch list has pretty much been done for majority of the building. I think they gotta come back and do the punch list for the mechanical room. And the exterior once they get the roof buttoned up. So we're in pretty good shape there. As for the budget, we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting. We have about $135,000 from some savings throughout the project that are available for use. We talked a little bit at the board meeting last time about some of the items that were under consideration. So the exterior doors, on both the outside and the inside of the classroom exterior doors, they're metal doors and they're getting rusting at the base or the bottom of them. And so we had looked at the cost of replacing them with aluminum exterior doors, and then we'd also looked at doing fiberglass doors, which is actually that kind of tan one is the exterior of our new water closet where the new water main comes into the fire system. So they were, about over a $40,000 differential between the two styles of doors. And so the recommendation would be to go forward with the fiberglass doors. The architects say that they do those a lot in buildings and are holding up well. The exterior handle will look more like the handle that's on that aluminum door because they will have crash bars on the inside. And so they'll just have pull handles on the outside of the classroom ones. So the cost to replace the exterior classroom doors would be $86,315. We have some exterior concrete repairs that just, some of them were damaged pre-construction, I guess, for the most part. Obviously during construction, it just doesn't help them out a lot. And then there's a few in the front that have kind of sunk where it becomes a low spot for potential water pooling and ponding and freezing at winter time. And then the exterior soffit fascia, obviously we've got new siding, we've got new eaves that'll be going on everywhere, and we have some soffit fascia that's kind of was done in 3 different generations up there that all has different looks. So we thought painting the entire soffit fascia at one time to give it all a look and a new look to kind of be consistent with everything else on the exterior made sense. And so those 3 projects, I didn't total them entirely here, but it looks like it's 30 and another 86. So they'll take you up to about 117,000. We'll leave a few dollars left over. We'll look to see, we'll have a little interest earnings and a little, see if there's any other savings that come up, and then we can consider either doing some LVT in the main office corridor or purchasing some library furniture. Wouldn't be able to fund all of the library furniture, but maybe we can do part of it and part of it with long-term maintenance. But for now, we're recommending the exterior classroom doors be replaced. We're recommending that the exterior concrete repairs take place, and we're recommending the painting of the soffit fascia out of the remaining savings that were there from the project.
Ron, I just have a couple of questions. The previously approved additions, is the 135 after that?
Yes, yep.
Okay. And the doors, the FRP doors, what's the warranty on those?
I'll look to Rich. Did they say they're a 10 or a?
Do you remember, I think it was
Is either a 10 or a 10, 12, or a 15. It was something, one of those.
10 or 15 at that. I can double check and verify.
What does FRP stand for?
What's that?
FRP?
Fiberglass, what?
Reinforced polymer or something, or, yeah.
One thing to know with the doors over the years, we didn't have gutters back there. So we went to 4 to 5 pallet of salt down to like 3/4 of a pallet now with the gutters and then the drain tile that we put in previously, so.
Okay. And the remaining work on the roof hasn't been interrupting day-to-day operations?
No, and I would look to Amy.
The roof work,
The roof
has
work.
the construction on the roof, has that been interfering with learning during the day?
Yes, however, we know that it's short term and we just need to go with the flow. But yeah, I mean, it's, the roof shakes, the smartboard shakes. It's okay though. We're adapting.
Any more questions for Ron or Rich or Fig on the North Side project update? I do have one. So at completion of the project, we have generally been providing information to the public at closure of the project, just to let people know that we've completed all the work we stated we were going to do in the referendum, provide pictures, stuff like that. Do we have that planned out, or?
I think once we
Can
get
we do
I
that?
think once we get the doors on, we can do that. Obviously, there'll still be some more work to come, and we can state that at the time. The exterior doors and those things that we just approved tonight, as well as what other little things we can say are still to be done. But I think once you have the cabinet doors and the hallway doors on, that would make sense to do it at that point in time. So probably that October, mid-October timeframe.
All right, thanks for the update. Move on to the next item. So we've got an approval of Start College Now application. Anything to add to this, Fig, or just looking for approval?
Yeah, so Jeremy, this is your recommendation?
Yep, she's gonna see the one course that we don't offer to get started on nursing, so it's for CNA and we don't offer that, and I would endorse that.
All right. Entertain a motion if somebody would like to make it.
Second.
A motion by Phil, and I think I heard Cheryl as a second. The motion is to approve the Start College Now application of Sydney Vita, allowing for class to be taken at Blackhawk Technical College, Monroe campus, in the nursing assistant program as recommended by Jeremy Jackson, high school principal. Any additional discussion or questions? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, so now we're on to item C. This will be a referendum update. So things are becoming a little more clear, tax information and other items as we head towards the November 8th vote. And administration is going to walk us through information that we're providing to the public and some of the plans regarding educating them.
Okay, so everybody on the board has a copy of a newsletter that Jen Bochar has put together with the information that we've provided. So this is gonna be one continuous sheet that's folded and then mailed. So if you took it and you folded it in half, it'll have information and then the mailing information on the back. So this is a lot of the information that aligns with the mission of the school to provide modern education and address the shortcomings for the facility as far as the infrastructure and everything else. So there are a few comparative photos. There's a couple renderings on the second page. And of course, one page at the very top has the talk about the finances. So this will be getting printed this week. And Jen, this will getting mailed out maybe the end of the week or, yep. So that'll be going out. And so that's all continuous with all the other information that we've been putting together. So before I go much further, Jen, are you queued up with the video? So Ron did a video early on, and I know the monitors are not in a great place. On our website, when you click on the M, it puts you right to, it takes you right to the referendum with all the stuff that's organized, and it's excellent. It exceeds the way that we managed our website in my previous district. But I want to go ahead and start with the video in case some of you haven't seen it. It's about 3 minutes. Hello, my name is Rodney Figueroa. I am the new superintendent of Monroe School District, and I'm very pleased to be here. And I'd have to say that it's a very exciting time to be in the school district because I know that you're looking at a major facilities project with the referendum coming up with the high school. Mr. Ron Olson has been in the community for about 15 years, very responsible and respected individual in the school district and community, and he will be sharing some more information about the project that I hope to become more intimately informed about over the coming months as we move forward with finding out where the voters sit with supporting their children, the most important asset this community has.
So the process that we've been in for the referendum has actually been going on for over 5 years now. We started back in 2017 when we had C.G. Schmidt and PRA, our construction company, and our architects come and study all of our facilities and create a cost for making any repairs or updates to the buildings that were necessary. We engaged a community facility committee to look at those results and to discuss what we might want to do as we go forward with all of our facilities. We knew we had some foundation issues here. We knew we had some issues with water infiltration and some mold issues. And then as we started to dig deeper, we realized that all of our mechanical systems were approaching the end of their useful life, which led to some of those school issues with just good air quality for our students. We looked at a number of options from fixing and adding on to the current facility and operating as it was to an option that we looked like we were going to move to in 2020, which would have been converting it to a 712 and having some major additions. They then also looked at the money that we would have been putting into our existing facility, $86 million to renovate and add on to the current facility, versus $88 million for a new high school facility that would have been off on a new site by its own. Were we sure that, investing that amount of money into a building, which parts of were going to be nearly 70 years old at the time it was completed, made the best sense for our community versus having a brand new building that was designed for the education that we live in the world today versus being designed for the education of 50, 60, 70 years ago? Even little things such as the entire electrical infrastructure of the facility. We live in a far different world right now with everyone having multiple devices, smartboards in classrooms, computers in classrooms, Chromebooks in classrooms. Back in the 1950s and 60s, those just weren't a reality. And so even things such as electrical outlets in the classrooms becomes a huge issue and concern for the district. All those things led us to the point where we decided that we had to come to a referendum to the community so that the community could decide whether we wanted to at least get our high school into a sound physical state moving forward with a new facility that we could build our district off of for the future to come.
So there'll be some follow-up videos. Lisa from Baird is gonna do a video explaining the breakdowns and how things break down financially and how debt is managed in a way that it makes it the most manageable for taxpayers based on what our current debt is. So that is coming. There've been several other things that are going on, but you've been talking about as a board, this is a proposal for a new high school and a new site. It would be a campus. We are in the process right now of negotiating for a piece of property, which would make our campus between 60 and 80 acres and afford any potential future growth. And we could plan for that as we build the building. So also in the referendum is significant upgrades to the HVAC and systems at Abraham Lincoln. And I just want to make sure that we mention that. So Abraham Lincoln is going to remain a community school as the board decided. And it's going to need renovations similar to what have been done at Parkside and at Northside. So those are going to be done. So we can continue to use that building for, 20, 30 more years if needed. So that would be, we deal with the roof, the envelope, the HVAC system, any types of needed renovation, obviously updating the bathrooms to modernize the bathrooms in many of the learning spaces. So it'll get, like I said, very similar type renovations that we have with Northside and Parkside in the last few years. So I believe that the investment the board is making in Abraham Lincoln shows a commitment to that community school. So we do have 2 tours scheduled, and in the front, actually, Rich, can you grab that board there? Board, yep. So these are the poster boards for presentations. So just show everybody here. So we will have these going up. We ordered easels for them too, but they will be going up, and we'll take them with us when we do presentations. We have our first presentation next week, Wednesday at 6 o'clock at the high school. So we're planning for an hour and a half. We'll do a presentation, do a tour, question and answer. One of the things that we had talked about doing was videotaping one of the presentations so that we can post that on the site also, because we know that everybody's not going to be able to physically come to the high school. And to be fair, walk the entire high school and see all the areas that we're struggling with right now. Just with the stairs and the location of some of those, we're not going to be able to get some people in those areas. So on the website, Jen, you got the website up yet? So if we go right to the referendum page again. So right here, it talks about the referendum on the 8th, talks about the wording. Video is there. And then we have the fact sheet. And if you have not looked at the frequently asked questions, so we do update that on a weekly basis. So when we hear that there are questions from the community, we try to get that in there. Ron keeps the question and answers up. The information sheet, voting information. So can you click on the existing conditions? So we have some pictures, and just to kind of show some of the things that we have. This is the basement and the main utilities area. That's where our foundation is sinking. in those science areas. Locker rooms that are in a basement and don't have access. Bathrooms that may have been remodeled in the 70s, possibly, maybe 80s, I don't know. Again, non-ADA accessible. Is that all there? Okay. Then you had some other, there were some comparative ones on there too, Jen. So then here's some comparisons here. So Oak Creek did a similar project to what my previous district did, is they had an upgrade in their tech ed area. And so it's just a comparison. So our tech ed classroom look to what the tech ed classroom looks like in a modern workspace. You can read these, I don't have to read them all. And those were not swimming pools, those were for not aquaponics, for, what's it called where you,
You look like aquaponics.
was it aquaponics? It's not fish, they weren't harvesting fish? Okay, I just thought fish fry, okay.
Fish feed off the plants.
Yeah. So just some photos for comparison. So you can so people can see what some of the more modern facilities look like. And in the video too, we showed some of our spaces and some of the renderings. What else we have here? Q&A. Okay, what's after modern school? Things on the website there. Survey results is on there. The referendum timeline is on there. And then a list of who is on the district facilities committee, which my intention is to re-engage them via email this week so that we can bring them up to speed on where we are and where we're going from here up until the referendum. So we have, like I said, the first scheduled tour is September 21st from 6 to 7:30. The second scheduled tour is on the October 11th, same time at the high school. Newsletters going out. We've done several radio slots already. Rich and I did a radio slot with Mike Zwiefel last week that went. And then they've been putting some different things out on the air for the Monroe Minute and such. So there's at least 2 more talk show sections that are gonna be coming out with Mike Zwiefel. And I just met with Allison Schilt today about some things to help us get messaging out. So, and we can talk more about that, basically with, information about voting, information about why this is needed, things like that. So those are things that we're gonna look at as a district. We do have scheduled some groups. So we have a schedule with the Noon Optimists on October 11th. We're gonna do a presentation for them. All 3 elementary parent-teacher organizations are gonna be presenting to them. We have notifications out to the Greene County Young Professionals, Lions Club, Women's Club, and Kiwanis Club. But we haven't got confirmation yet on a date from them to do the presentation. And we did meet with the mayor, Donna Douglas, and I'm working with her right now to schedule a city council meeting potentially at the high school, so we can bring the city council through and they can take a look at the high school and see firsthand, what it is and understand why we're asking, for an $88 million referendum for a new school. Some of the other things that are in there is, we were talking about, there's been some questions about how are we gonna guarantee we get a quality construction. And one of the things that a lot of schools are doing, actually not just schools but businesses, is they hire a person called an owner's rep. And that person's only job is to advocate for the school on the project full-time. So you have some very knowledgeable people here on staff that have been through many, many construction projects, but they also have other jobs to do. It's not realistic to expect, Rich as building and grounds director, or Ron as business director, or me as superintendent, to be able, even among the 3 of us, to juggle that in a way that we can officially make sure that things are being done the way they're supposed to be done. For the most part, that's what happens, but an owner's rep is gonna make sure that, what is bid is what we're gonna get. So it's a higher level of quality control. And pretty much to the job that they've had builders reps, they talked about how they've been at budget or saved money with a builder's rep, even at the expense of a builder's rep. So that's one way that we're gonna look to make sure that we don't have some of the quality control issues maybe that we've suffered before. So we talked about mill rate and the tax impact. It's always a concern. Money is always a big deal. When we do these, when we put this information out, the stuff that's out and published, when we say that, those are like, that's like worst case scenario. So we expect that when this passes, if this passes, that it is not gonna, it will be no more than what we're projecting. And we're hoping that it will be less than that, and, you know, and we'll know as we go forward. So the way things are set up, and you can look at the information that's on there, we look at comparative mill rates. So we would be about, we're just estimating based on what we know we're gonna get for state aid and income from the state, we would be about 50% higher in overall mill rate from what we were last year.
50 cents.
I'm sorry, 50 cents, not 50%, oh boy. So 50 cents higher, and it would actually, our mill rate would still be about 10 cents lower than it was in the 2020-2021 school year. Now, the debt portion of it, based on our estimates, is still $1.99. But with all the other revenues and all the other money that we have coming in, and it gets put into the average mill rate, that's what it looks like. So it's gonna look like, worst case scenario, 50 cents more than what it was last year. And then it would be about 9 or 10 cents less than it was 2 years ago. And then, Ron, historically, and that's, you said something about how long ago it's been since we've even had a mill rate this low?
We're well over 30 years since we've seen a levy rate as low as we are even this year. And we're gonna go down from there prior to the referendum before that. So I mean, even when you add the 50 cents back, we'll be close to our 30-year low. And our levy itself, we'll be talking about the budget here in one of the next agenda items. The levy itself that's being proposed for the annual meeting, pre-referendum, if this succeeds, is the same levy, not levy rate, the actual same levy, or a little less levy, I should say, than where it was 15 years ago. So I know we oftentimes hear taxes are always going up. There's a number of municipalities that are part of anybody's tax bill. But the school portion of people's levy, the school levy, is basically going to be less than it was 15 years ago for the budget that's being proposed at the annual meeting. So there are many things that today cost the same as they did 15 years ago. No doubt this referendum would be a big commitment and a big investment for our community. But I think hopefully they'll see that we've been good stewards of their dollars for a long time, and understand that, you need an investment in the community and in the school district to keep us going in a way that the community expects.
So a couple other things to add to this. So we've been presenting information at football games on Friday nights at home games. So it's been good. We've had a good mix of people that have stopped in for information. The social media, our social media channels has the information available. Our website's updated often. Jen, great work. Okay. And then, of course, we want to shoot a video of a presentation that we're going to be able to post on the website to help out the people that, even if they come to the school to listen to the information, maybe physically couldn't do the tour up and down the stairs and around the building. So, all right. So that's kind of like a quick summary of everything that's going on. And I think I mentioned earlier too that we are in the throes of negotiating for a location for a piece of property. And so we're hoping in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to let people know where we would intend to put the school if we're able to build it.
So that's really good news on the mill rate associated with the debt and the feels like associated mill rate. So as an example, if somebody had a $200,000 home, what would the annual tax increase look like at the feels like rate? So the expected increase that goes to the school district's
Yeah,
portion of the
so
levy.
it gets a little tricky in the nuances of what it is. The feels, there's certainly going to be a 50 cent, no more than a 50 cent levy increase compared to this year. So if you take 50 cents on a $200,000 home, you're talking basically $100. Now, there is a component of that is just equalization growth, so people may feel it a little more than that, but that's, there's a large component of it that is also the fact that we're gonna get an additional $1 million of state aid next year. That's driving that number down as well, and we also have one of our TIFs that is retiring, so that's bringing new valuation into the district that isn't residential growth. So it's tough for me to say exactly what it is, but yeah, that mill rate increase is not going to exceed 50 cents per thousand.
So I think you covered most of the questions that I've had with feedback from the community. So any other board members have any questions or comments? Anything you've heard from the community that we could address tonight, or administration could address it at another meeting?
We're gonna work really hard to communicate and be as transparent as possible. So if you do get questions that, you know, you're not really sure the answer, if you would send those to myself, we'll make sure that we can get those taken care of. And we'll be able to answer them. So.
Is there anything that you need from board members about public speaking events or engagements?
So the two that we have planned, so the one next week, Wednesday, and the one in October, we would like to have board members attend those.
Okay.
You know, we can post if we want to, but at least one board member, maybe two, because if we're hoping to get some participation from the community, so that's just more people that we'll be able to speak with then. So the information will be there. We'll go through the presentation, and you know they can see what this is.
Okay, what are those dates and times one more time?
Yep, so we have those on Wednesday, September 21st. These are both at the high school,
At what time?
6 to 7:30 p.m.
Okay.
And then Tuesday, October 11th, same time. And they're meeting in the library at the high school.
So for board members, if you have availability and would like to participate, just reach out to Fig, let him know you can be there. And then if it needs to be posted, we'll care for that. Okay.
So in boardsmanship, is that where we should talk about the potential tours maybe of?
Yeah, I think we've got that in boardsmanship, and we'll
Okay.
figure out.
All right.
Well, we have it here, actually, so we need to select a date to tour the Wisconsin Dells and Baraboo schools. So those are the two schools we'll be visiting, and it is under this
It is, okay.
update, so. What have they come back with as availability to host us?
They're willing to work with us, I think, is what they, had told Fig. And so for those of you who don't know, I know a few of the board members have been able to see a few districts, but at that point, we're mainly looking at renovated. Wisconsin Dells is a new high school construction, so you get a chance to see what a new high school facility looks like. Baraboo was a renovated, but a pretty major renovation. And that's actually been a few years ago now, probably 6 years ago now. But they're both right on the same trip, so same path, so we can kind of see a couple of them in one trip. Hopefully, we might be able to find a day where Jeremy, Joe, and Todd can come along as well, because I don't believe the three of you have been on many of the other trips, and so just to help get a feel for what this looks like, and we might have a few other facility committee folks or people who are excited about the potential of a project here to understand what a new high school might look like if we were able to bring one to our community.
So we're thinking most likely it would be the first week of October for the tours. So we will send out a doodle tomorrow and with some potential dates.
Okay.
We're looking at, if we left in the morning, we're looking at the majority of the day, so probably right around that 6 to 7 hours with travel time.
Yeah, ideally, we'd probably see one on the way up, trying to catch maybe an early lunch for us. We gotta verify exactly how long the Dells lunch goes to. But I think it would be good to see the end of the lunch period and then tour the building, and then come back. Because certainly part of new designs usually incorporate ways for kids to like interact and relate differently during lunch. So I'm curious to see what they did. I don't know what the Dells have done personally in that regards, but I know that as we saw other buildings when we were touring in the past, that was always a big thing, just to see, it's not a bunch of kids crammed into tables eating food as fast as they can. Hopefully it becomes a space where kids want to be in and be used for other reasons other than just eating.
Is Dell similar in student population?
Dell's would be a little smaller than us. They're probably 2/3 our side, or a little smaller even than
I
that.
want to say their high school is like 450 or 470, something like that.
Yeah. So.
But they built that with the idea that they were gonna grow
See
as
growth.
well.
Yes, yeah, they've got it built a little bigger. Actually, they're now expanding. They're, you know, it was.
Performing arts,
They weren't sure, you know, if it was gonna pass. It had a failure in the past, and it passed pretty easily the last go around. And then they came back and they're working on a performing arts center. So it's one of those things, once this community kind of sees it and understands it, then it's like, oh, yeah, this is a big deal, so.
So in addition to making it available for board members, we also extending invitations to District Facilities Committee, SOAR, and launch business partners, like who's
I'm
city
gonna,
council.
I think we
members,
can
like,
open it up to some of the groups. I do need to, I'm gonna call and talk to Terry Slack over at the Dells
Okay,
and just see how big of a group he's
right,
comfortable taking too,
Right.
so. We're their guests.
yep,
So-
absolutely. Okay,
So
Alright.
the short answer is yes and maybe.
okay, well, we'll find out how many we can get in there, and then, get a date going and start communicating with those
Yeah,
groups, see if they
Terry
can
and,
send representatives.
Terry and our architect Steve have done a few tours now, so they kind of have their pacing and their trip down, so I think that'll help, so.
All right, very well. Okay. Any additional questions or discussion on the referendum update? Okay, we'll move on to item D. It's a discussion and approval of COVID-19 protocol revisions for this current school year.
So we, the board obviously, adopted some guidelines early. And then as expected, the CDC came out with, updated guidelines literally like the week before school started. So we adapted ours, and Joe, we're lucky enough to have Joe here. So Joe, if you'd like to talk about those, that would be great.
Sure. So just want to talk about a few things with you all today. Some of it's informational, some of it is trying to take the temperature of the board and get some feedback from you all as far as what you're comfortable with. The document that was shared in board docs reflects some of the changes that were made, and I'll try to summarize those. I don't want to read everything to you, but I would assume that you guys have had a chance to look at some of this. But as you go down through into the second page of the document, you'll see a discussion around quarantine for individuals that are identified as COVID positive. One of the changes that FIG made or FIG approved after discussion and looking at the CDC recommendations is that individuals that get to the 6th day of the quarantine process and have their symptoms resolving and are fever-free for 24 hours would be allowed to come back to school without participating in the test to stay program. That's pretty standard practice across school districts now. I've reached out to a number of schools, and they indicated that they were going to fall in line with those recommendations. Ultimately, we didn't want to set ourselves up for fighting that battle, and if people are indeed without fever and have resolving symptoms, we wanted to allow them the opportunity to come back. Again, understanding that they would wear a mask through day 10 of the quarantine period. As I go through this, please jump in if you have any questions or if I'm sharing something that doesn't quite make sense. You also see as we move down under quarantine for those identified as a household contact, we have individuals identified as a household contact that participate in the test to stay program, must test through day 5 of the quarantine period. Those that receive negative tests through day 5 will be exempted from testing for the remainder of the 10-day period. That's a slight adjustment from what we had previously with those that received 3 consecutive negative tests. We're just trying to provide some consistency throughout this. I think everyone here understands and appreciates that if we have different language in different areas, that sets us up for people that are trying to poke holes in the plan. And ultimately, we're trying to provide something that makes sense, that has some alignment with the CDC's recommendations, and quite honestly, something that's relatively easy to remember when we're having conversations with people. And as you look down and we get into, if we were in a situation where we needed to move to the heightened COVID response plan, I think we're all hopeful that that won't be the case. You'll see some language in there that was revised, and much of that is to maintain consistency with what we just discussed regarding individuals who are household contacts and how we're going to handle those situations. So before I get into a couple other things, I just want to stop there and see if anyone has any questions regarding what we just discussed.
Under quarantine, the first bullet lists required to quarantine for 10 calendar days after symptoms, and then it mentions and until fever-free. The next bullet says they may return to school on day 6 if they're fever-free without fever-reducing medication. Does that first bullet just need to be struck? Does the second bullet capture? Not sure why we'd tell them to quarantine for 10 days if we let them come back on day 6.
Everyone has a mask.
Yeah, I think what we were trying, that's a good question, Rich, and I think Cheryl, you're right on target. I think what we're trying to capture is the default position is that you're out for 10 days.
Okay.
However, if you choose to wear a mask and you meet the conditions as stated, you're able to come back. So I think to your point, maybe we want to clarify that a little bit, because I'll be the first to say, as the guy that writes some of this sometimes, in my mind, it makes sense. And then as I share it out with these guys, they'll be like, what the heck does that mean? And so this might be one where, thank you, Cheryl, for picking up what I was laying down. But I think you're right that it might be in our best interest to be a bit more explicit about that. So I'll make a note of that. Any other questions related to those?
Mine was gonna be the same call out, because I think when you read that, the next one where it has the individual identified as household contacts can participate in the test to stay through day 5 of the quarantine period. And then it said will be exempted for the remainder of the 10-day period. So it's referring back to that first
Sure.
bullet, right?
Yes. So we'll go through that carefully, and I'll share it with some of our staff. Cindy's always good about that as well, reading some things and saying, you're not making any sense. So we'll definitely do that, because I do want it to be very clear as far as the intent of the language, so we don't create any unnecessary conflict. Thanks, appreciate that. Okay, a couple other things. Test to stay is obviously a part of the plan.
Can I ask you one more?
Sure,
quick question
please.
before we move on? Sorry. So if you're COVID positive, you can return to school on day 6 if you're fever-free for 24 hours. If you are a close contact and choose not to participate in test to stay, you must quarantine for 10.
Correct. So if you're a household contact, our position is that you're presumed positive, right? And so in order to return, we're asking you to participate in the test to stay program. And if you do so, and you test through day 5 of the quarantine period, those that receive negative tests through day 5 will no longer have to take the test, but will have to continue to wear a mask through day 10 to ensure safety.
I think maybe that's the piece that's
Maybe
missing.
that's the piece that's missing, yeah. So they can return on day 6, but have to continue to wear a mask.
Correct.
Okay. So that's like, the second bullet calls out the 10 days. It's just aligning
Sure.
the quarantine period with folks that are COVID positive and folks that are household contacts.
Yeah, okay.
And these are all, so the CDC guidelines, these are the are we editing the CDC guidelines, or are we just
I would say we're aligning much of our plan to the CDC, however, there are some things that are unique to Monroe.
Okay.
Test to stay is not something that's common across most school districts at this point. I would tell you, we're probably in the minority there. We did have some conversation about whether or not we would continue, or whether or not we would come back to the board and discuss whether or not we should continue test to stay. After a conversation with FIG, we felt that at this time, it was important to maintain test to stay as we get the school year started. And then as we learn more, perhaps that might be something that we'd be more comfortable discussing. And I'll provide more information on the test to stay program in a little bit, because it has provided a number of challenges for us, but I think we're in a good place at this point.
So one of the other things too with reporting right now, the only thing that has to be reported are positives or presumed positives. So they're not interested in any other data other than how many people do we have in the school community that were positive or presumed positive. So, Joe, go ahead.
No, so good questions. And certainly appreciate the feedback on clarifying some of these things. Rich, did I answer your question or?
Yeah, if you're gonna review the second bullet to align it.
Yep, I made a note of that. So we'll go through it and make sure that that's more clear and make sure that it's capturing all those conditions explicitly. So we just referenced test to stay, and I just shared that we're looking at options relative to that. As we're planning this summer, one of the things, or one of the resources that we're relying on is a COVID clinic, which is an agency that was assigned to us. Apparently there are a couple of options, and Dana Kundert, our new school nurse, who's done a phenomenal job as she's tried to learn a new job and deal with all the issues associated with COVID. Applied, we were told it was COVID clinic. COVID clinic informed us that they were going to be able to provide 2 people per site that we identify to conduct our test to stay program. We were initially looking at conducting test to stay here at the Bauer Education Center, and then also some test to stay programs at each of our buildings. Long story short, that didn't work out. They weren't able to give us what we needed. And so it forced us to pivot, look at some other options. And what we are going to be doing with our test to stay program is we're not going to be able to offer anything at the Bauer Education Center, but instead we're going to be offering the test to stay program at each of the schools. The main reason for that is that we knew we had a bit of an equity issue with some families that couldn't get their kids to this facility for testing. And then if they tested and they tested negative, get them to their school. And so the idea was, let's see if we can set up a safe test to stay program in each of the schools to allow, it doesn't necessarily address all of the issues, but it certainly eases the burden on our parents. The way in which we're doing that is we're utilizing our health assistant staff to run the program. Worked with Ron and Fig to make some adjustment to hours. And it's a credit to our health assistant team that they're willing to be so flexible. They're adjusting schedules to start at 7:45 in the morning. On average, most of them we're starting at around 9 o'clock, 9:30-ish, depending on the building. So we're gonna add some hours for some of our health assistants, but ultimately it's gonna allow us to run the programs in the schools. We're going to use an online registration system, so we'll be able to get a sense of how many people are coming in each day. We've identified locations within each of the buildings, and we feel that we're going to be able to run it in a fairly efficient manner. Obviously, as activity goes up, that may put more of a stress on our buildings, and we're going to have to take a look at that. And we'll monitor that closely. And part of the registration system is it'll send notifications to the health assistants, Dana, myself, so that we have a sense of how many people are coming in and participating in the program. And then obviously, the principals are always great about giving me feedback if something's not working in the building. So we're feeling pretty good about that right now. Test to stay is primarily going to be used for individuals that have been identified as household contacts or those that are exhibiting symptoms that align with the COVID symptoms. So if we have, whether it be students or staff that may have some symptoms and would like to get tested so they can continue at school, we'll have them participate as well. Dana feels really good about our test supply and that we're in a good place with that. We feel good about our PPE. We're gonna have to make sure that we do this in a way that does not lead to unnecessary exposure within the buildings. I think that was the flip side of this last year, why we're at the Bauer Center, is that we wanted to avoid some of that potential exposure. But we're trying to come up with a system that not only is more equitable, but honestly is moving us more towards the endemic phase of COVID and looking at life with this virus for the foreseeable future. So that's where we're at with Test to Stay. I'd certainly be willing to answer any questions you have regarding that shift. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about with the board was notification of exposure. Within our current plan, when we have an individual that tests positive, we do notify. In our plan, it currently says we're notifying by classroom. I think the idea has been that we wanted to provide information to our families when there is a positive case so they can be aware and plan accordingly. I think as we move through this and we've lived through some of it, I think we've seen quite a few notification of exposure messages go out. Is that a fair statement? Principals, as the individuals that send that out, it's been a lot. And so I think one concern is that the frequency of those messages have been so much that they almost feel like they've lost their value to some extent. I think you can't argue that, you know, people are receiving some information and have some awareness of the COVID activity. But I'm wondering if we've moved past the need for the notice of exposure and instead we can look at another mechanism to communicate the amount of COVID activity within the schools. At the very least, I would recommend that we move the notification of exposure to grade level by building. And so I say that because obviously if it's activity within Parkside at third grade, we don't need to go across all third grade, but within a particular building, and certainly at the middle school, high school, that's all inclusive of the grade levels. But certainly, as I've received some feedback from individuals, including some of our principals, we're wondering if the board is interested in entertaining the idea of moving away from the notification of exposure. So I'll stop there and I'll take any feedback, thoughts. Fig, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, kind of to Joe's point, you know, that they get notices all the time and it ends up, it's like stop signs you don't see, you just know you're gonna stop. So when we send out notices, we want people to read them and we want them to know what's going on. Everybody knows that we have COVID, it's around. So just wherever the board is with it. So right now, like today, we had sent out some notifications because we had some positives. So, but that, and all of this stuff is gonna evolve just as the pandemic evolves or goes to endemic, however it's gonna work, so.
What are the alternative forms of communicating that you just mentioned?
Great question, Rich. So what I might suggest is that everyone's familiar with our dashboard. I think what we could build into that dashboard is trends by building, a week after week trend to give a sense of how much the COVID activity has gone up or down in that particular building. I think we could also have an opt-in for parents that want that emailed to them. I can tell you that as we've sent out notifications, we've had a number of not so friendly messages back saying a variety of things. And so my preference would be to send out a communication to all parents saying, if you would like a weekly update regarding the COVID activity, we're happy to provide that. And also make that publicly available at all times within our website. I think that captures the spirit of what we're trying to do with the notifications. I think from my perspective, we have to understand that COVID's in our buildings. I mean, it's in each of our buildings right now, and while we have some numbers, we're able to quantify it a bit. The reality is most of it's going unreported at this point. The testing and the sharing of information is nowhere close to what it used to be. Now, I'm not suggesting that we ignore the activity. I think it's important that we do stay on top of it. But I think realistically, people should plan accordingly. People should, if they're making decisions about their children and masking behavior, I think they should plan knowing that there's likely COVID within our schools currently. So that would be my recommendation. But I understand some might have some concerns or feedback, and I'm happy to discuss it.
Questions, concerns?
Well, I think the message is diluted. You're sending out these notices routinely and it's just diluted information. People aren't paying attention. I think the dashboard's a good idea. I suppose some type of opt-in program like you recommended, Joe, is maybe a good idea. Some people may not be fluid with using the dashboard, the website.
And we would make that very, I mean, it'd be a simple Google form that I would create. We'd send it out to all parents. They'd click on it and say, are you interested in receiving this? Yes, enter your email address. It populates a spreadsheet. We do a mail merge, and we send that out to that list that we can update every week if people opt in or out. And
But it wouldn't be every day. I think that's
it
what
would be at the end of every week. It'd basically be Friday, or if we had a long weekend, we'd at the end of the week. And then we'd provide the totals, we'd provide the trends in each of the buildings so people are aware.
I'm okay with your suggestion too. I mean, it hits everyone. If you want to still get it, you can. You don't, those that don't want it aren't gonna get it. Or you can go look if you want.
The other thing I would say, nothing about that plan would prevent us if we saw the activity increasing to a level where we felt it was necessary to start providing more information to people. Certainly, that's always an option that's available to us. But yeah, I think the common feeling across the board with the principals, and you all are welcome to jump in if you disagree with what I'm saying, is that we're sending these out and they'll set up probably pretty well. The message is pretty diluted at this point.
You could probably look at like the number of kids still choosing to mask in school as probably an indicator of maybe, parents' level of concern. And so if, they're saying they want to be notified, but they're not maybe taking that precaution. I don't know if those things correlate or not. People might still want that, but we don't have a lot of kids masking. And I also just want to make sure if we're providing them information that it's truly accurate, right? Last year, the year before, maybe we were doing less to mix across homerooms, or we were doing less, our kids have open seating in the lunchroom now in some of the buildings, right? So while I might be saying Mrs. Johnson's third grade class got a notification because that's where the positive was, well, they interacted just as much with kids in those other two homerooms. So I don't even know that I'd be accurately notifying, which then kind of takes away maybe why you would notify.
I get the the time it takes in some of those things, and I think there are people that obviously don't appreciate those things. There are people though that do.
Yep.
So I just think you gotta go in with that there are people that maybe spend a little bit more time evaluating their kid after an exposure. That is out there.
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, I had the conversation with my wife at lunch today, and she was one of them who feels exactly the way you did. So she wasn't crazy that I was potentially making a recommendation that didn't align with her point of view. But I think that's absolutely right, Tim. I think there are people that do like that level of information. And for me, I guess I'm looking at this as, how do we handle this going into the future? Are we going to provide this level of information for the next year, 2 years, 3 years? I don't know the answer to that, and ultimately that depends on what the board wants. But I think at some point we're going to have to transition to maybe a different level of information, but I certainly understand.
With the exception, I think, as you said, I think today, I looked at their dashboard, we got 12.
Yeah, we have 5 positive, 7 that are quarantined quarantined during the test to
So
say.
that number isn't real excessive today, but I guess at some point, if you want to prevent spread, more than that, I mean, you'd almost have to get into some notification at some point if you started seeing cases go way up.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, ultimately FIG's gonna make a lot of these decisions, but if we see the activity go up, I mean, if we see what we saw in January, then you're probably gonna hear from us a heck of a lot more related to this. But I think back to the point of the message being diluted, there are people that simply weren't even reading messages related to COVID when we were sending them out because they're like, I get it. And I think if we're communicating when we feel it's absolutely necessary, I think people are more likely to pay attention to it. And maybe that's not accurate or true. That's just my own belief and perspective on this.
I also just think and I would say right now, I think there's a lot of cases out there and people are not testing. And so we're sending out notifications and it's not accurate. And it's almost like if we just send it to one homeroom or one grade level, we actually should be sending it to the whole building. Because there's so much interaction between kids and adults. Because we're not using those practices as Jenna was talking about. So I think we're just in a very different phase than we were.
On some level, it feels artificial. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just gonna say, and that's, our health assistant and I talked about that today, and that's really essentially what we would be doing. I mean, because we don't have grade levels, they're all mixed amongst all classes, lunchrooms, they're all over the place, so we can't, if we went back to trying to identify who was exposed, would be, again, contact tracing.
Right.
We have to have the digital seating charts and all that, so it just doesn't feel like a place we wanna go. And to Amy's point, I know there are people coming to school that have never tested for anything.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeremy, and I forgot to mention that. Back when we were contact tracing, this made more sense, right? Because there was more specificity in the process. That's not where we're at right now. And so it does feel like whether we're not necessarily feeling as though the information is as helpful as it should be or is accurate.
I think this is a good middle ground too to shift to, because if people want the information, they're gonna read it. And to your point, Tim, if they're reading it and they're seeing that there's a spike in their children's school, they're probably gonna take more precautions. So at least they're getting some level of detail, but I don't think, unless we're gonna go back all the way to the beginning and contact trace, I don't know that the data is gonna be accurate anyway. So I think that this is a good middle ground for now. I would agree with this recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a good next proximal step. We know a lot more now than we did at the beginning of the pandemic. There's now, there are vaccinations or boosters and vaccinations available for all ages. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was a clear and present danger to public health. Not that it's not dangerous at this point, but the treatments and other mitigating controls to help work through contracting the virus have improved. So I think as our thinking evolves and the community's ability to work through infection evolves, our program and notification and response to positives evolves with it.
So do we wanna just go ahead and make the change? Do you wanna make a motion to make the change?
If we know exactly what the changes are, so I know that we talked about some other things inside this document, that you have the authority to make the changes as necessary until the next meeting. So if you want an opportunity to go through the changes that we talked about, and then you're empowered to make those changes, and then bring it back for approval at the next meeting,
Okay,
we can
done.
do that. Okay.
Appreciate the feedback.
Any additional discussion, questions before we move on? All right, so we're on to item E. This is Ron's favorite part of the meeting, I believe. This is This is where we get to hear about the preliminary operating budget for the annual meeting. Some good news for us. I'm gonna give it to you, Ron. Go ahead and take it
Yeah.
over.
Spent a lot of time last week, working on, the updates to the budget, and you're right, it actually, I like working on the budget. It's more of my job. I got to deal with, the budget sometimes than all the other stuff we sometimes are dealing with, so, this is the budget that will go to the, annual meeting. It'll be the budget that we, put into the paper, as well as we put into the annual meeting booklets, and so that's why we're doing this now, to give us time to make those preparations for our annual meeting in the middle of October. I'm gonna go through, I'll probably touch on many of this, the attachments and handouts you got, but I'm gonna start kind of speaking from the summary that I sent out to you. The levy is currently projecting at a 7.57% reduction, from the current year. That's being driven predominantly because we are estimating an additional $1,046,000 of state aid coming in, and I'll talk a little bit more to that in a second. So our projected levy, and that's the levy itself, not the levy rate, as I mentioned earlier during the referendum discussion, is actually less than the district levy from 15 years ago. So the good news is, for people who, don't like the taxes going up, our levy's been really steady for the last 15 years. The bad news is ideally you would like to see there being some growth in there to help fund our education, and that's partly why we sometimes have the operating referendum discussions that we have to bring up periodically as well. In addition to that reduction in the levy, we are seeing a large increase in property valuation across the state, as well as locally. I used a 15% equalized valuation increase. Our consultants are actually projecting 17 to 18% for Monroe, so even more than that, but I like to be on the conservative side of that. So with the reduction in the levy of over nearly 7.6%, and with the valuation increase of 15% being estimated at this time, we're looking at a 19.63% reduction in our levy rate to $7.40, which is $1.80 less than this year's, and we were already at a 30-plus year low this year before that happened. So that's just driving our levy rate down even further. The budgeted deficit for Fund 10 is $926,251. I think we were up closer to 1.8 million, almost 1.9 when we talked less, so we were able to bring that down considerably. And keep in mind that we carried forward $310,226 of designated fund balance from the governor's allocation of federal dollars we received last year to help offset what we knew was going to be some inflationary increases for not only salaries and fringes, but other things this year. And so we have that to apply against it as well. I talked a little bit about the state aid increasing $1,046,589, which then drives our levy down a little over $1 million. The actual estimate from DPI showed it could be as much as an additional 300,000 more than that. I rebuilt the aid formula based upon what our actual revenues and expenditures were for last year, so it gives me a little better picture at it. But the reality is each district is going to either spend more or less than what they budgeted, and then that kind of changes the state as a whole. And so the truth will probably come out somewhere between where my number is and where their estimate is. And so there is a potential, I would say, that we'll get even more state aid, and that would lower our levy even more. ESSER 3 funds, we basically allocated ESSER 3 funds to help offset the cost of all of our ELL staffing across the district, to offset any of our interventionist programs that are not funded by other federal programs. So our interventionists at the high school, our two at the middle school, one of our folks at Abe Lincoln who's not federally funded, and then our individual at Northside who's not federally funded. So we're going to cover all those positions for the coming year with ESSER 3 funds. We're also covering some of the curriculum for the new ELA programming that we have. So that came to $1.2 million. That'll leave us about $200,000 of ESSER 3 funds remaining for next year that we'll continue to allocate to offset probably some salaries next year for those non-federal funded programs, or staff, I should say. The rest of Fund 10 revenues are basically the same, a couple of areas. I mentioned the new governor's allocation he just announced for this year. There's $91.15 per pupil from unallocated COVID dollars he's dedicating to education. So that's going to be a little more than $200,000 of additional revenue in this year's budget, which was partly how we closed some of that gap that we had. He's going to continue to fund the Get Kids Ahead mental health initiative that he started last year. And so that's, this year was about $40,000. Basically, there's going to be, I want to say a $10,000 to $20,000 allocation for our district. And then it just depends upon how many other districts opt in to see if we get up to the 40,000. That's what we received last year. And he put the same amount of funds into it. Couple areas where we reduced our revenues was areas where we reduced some staffing costs as well. So we weren't able to find a person to fill one of our elementary Spanish positions. So obviously that means we'll get a little less funding from the colony to help offset that. We usually have our Title I spending usually far exceeds what our budget is. We had one of our reading specialists who's title funded leave shortly before school started. And so we'll have a sub in there, but those subs aren't going to likely be reading licensed subs. So we won't be able to claim that position. What does that mean? Means we'll probably, instead of getting 280,000, we'll get about 260,000. And then we will have 20,000 left over next year to fund when we're back to 4 full-time title staffing like we normally have every other year. Because we always spend about 50 to 60,000 more in our title staff than we actually get in title funding. Our Fund 10 budget expenditures are 2.82% more than last year's budget. Remember, we bring our budget in usually a little bit under, so it's about 5.7% more than last year's actual. Again, we knew we were going to have some increased costs this year from the inflationary increase for staffing, as well as utilities, the transportation with the fuel escalator, all those things that come into play. We had some ELL expansions last year that we're continuing those staffing going into this year. We brought back the school psychologist position at Abe Lincoln. And so those are some of the big moving parts, but all in all, pretty happy with where the budget came in once we had all the changes from the spring. Fund 21, put that budget into place. Fund 27 always balances because we make the transfer to make Fund 27 balance out. In the spring, I didn't have Fund 21 budget in there. Last year, we found that all those programs for our high school and middle school and elementary activities was about $650,000 was used. So put in revenues and expenditures of $650,000. And then I'll talk to it a little bit. We'll actually approve 2 levies and 2 budgets based upon whether the referendum does or doesn't pass. So you will present and we'll put in the paper it without the referendum, and then we'll have an alternate should the referendum pass that the board would then approve at the end of we'd update it at the end of October and then approve it then. I think I covered most of the things, so I'm just trying to see if there's anything in the budget adoption sheets I didn't mention. Fund 50, we had a good year last year, as we talked about. We actually, in the actuals last year, were able to build back the Fund 50 fund balance by about $400,000 with the free and full federal funding. We're anticipating a deficit for the coming year, but we have a pretty significant fund balance there right now. So we're okay with that because we didn't want to make a huge adjustment to what we're charging for meals until we have an idea of exactly what it looks like when we're back to operating close to normal. Revenue limits in there. The one thing I'll point out in the revenue limit is if you look at where the memberships are, 2020 was the year, recall when COVID broke out in the spring, when we didn't run summer school, so we only had a 5 count for that summer school program. 2020-21 school year, which includes the summer of 2020, is basically what then becomes the 21-22 state aid is based off of. So when last year, when the state put additional money into school aid formula, because we had such a huge reduction in our summer school enrollment, it meant that we, as other districts saw a huge aid increase, we actually saw an aid reduction. And so that's why this year, now that we had, last year we had summer school, once we got that count on, that's why we're now getting our aid increased back up to where it should be. And so that's why we're seeing that offset against our levy. If we were a school district that didn't run a summer school or didn't run a significant summer school, we would have seen that aid increase last year, and our levy rate this year would have been even lower. Looking at the tax apportionment, you can see the total levy of $11,474,000. Again, a 7.57% reduction from last year. Our general fund levy is actually down 11%, 10.9. Community service fund went up 10,000, so that's up 0.88%. And debt service levy is up 2.68%. It grows a little bit based upon what they expect your property valuation to grow whenever they set it years ago. And then you see the reduction in the levy rate of 19.63. If you go to the levy history, pre-referendum discussion, you can see there in 2007, 2008, our levy was $11.64 million. We're now at $11.47 million. So again, just that the fact that our levy rate is, not only our levy rate, but our levy itself is less than it was going back to 2007, 2008. Our mill rate back then was 12.04. It's all the way down to 7.40 now, so significantly reduced. You do have the numbers in there for the alternate should the referendum pass, and obviously there's a significant increase in the debt service when the cost of the high school would come on. The levy rate there, though, getting to some of the discussion earlier during the referendum, you see right now, based upon these numbers, would be $952.83, which is actually a $32 increase. And so that's why when we say we think it will be less than a $50 increase, or 50 cents mill rate increase from last year, meaning this current year, even if the referendum passes. I only think that this number could get better if we get more state aid, if we get more valuation growth. That's only going to drive that number down even further. So that's what we're talking about. And then the levy history, again, just shows it with the alternate with the high school passing, and then obviously, it is your total levy does take quite a bit of a jump when you have an $88 million new high school come on that you're going to pay off over 20 years. But that levy rate again is, I don't know why my number there is slightly different than my other page. So I got to verify what I got going on there. Oh, I got a 14% instead of a 15% population growth there. So that was a number that wasn't updated. So I'll make that adjustment. And any questions? Otherwise, this will be what we'll take to the annual meeting. Good news, limited growth on the expenditure side. Our deficit came down from where we were looking at the start of the summer to a pretty manageable number once we apply the governor's amount to it. Well within what we usually bring our budget in under. So we should balance out by the end of the year. And again, on the tax side of the world, we look pretty good as well.
Thank you, Ron. The tax increment district that was closed out, where was that at?
I have to, let's see, I got to run them through my head. Because we had a few years, I think that was the pick and save area one, because it was the one for the ethanol plant was a couple of years before that. So I would have to verify that for sure, but I believe it was the pick and save area coming in along that's part of 8th Street down there from the west into where the new pick and save is.
Were there funds remaining in there that are distributed to the levying authorities or?
We did, yeah, and that's in our revenues, and let me see if I get to the, if I have enough detail in here, I can get to that. No, it falls in our tax line item. I wanna say we got about 100 or 117,000 this year.
Okay.
Hit that line item.
Okay, and that's a one-time
It's a one-time,
disbursement,
yeah,
right? So we don't get to see that again.
We didn't get, however, tens or hundreds of millions that Verona got when Epic closed their TIF, but we did get a little funds distribution in there.
Okay, awesome. And then, I know we're not quite there yet, but third Friday counts, do we have a feel for?
Yeah, I don't have a great feel for it, so we put 2,200 into that revenue limit, and certainly if the number, it's counterintuitive right now. If we actually come in less than that, we'll get a bigger increase on the revenue limit because of the hold harmless. However, our base going forward gets smaller. If we get more students than that, we'll actually be able to levy a little less, but obviously we have a better base moving forward. So not huge changes based upon the fact that we're gonna see a reduction in our membership 3-year average regardless of where that number moves, unless, this week would suddenly have a huge influx of kids we're not expecting. But we've had enough movement in the last 2 weeks. I didn't have a chance to redo the number today. I will say today was slower, so I think hopefully finally we're seeing a settling down of families. I know they're tracing out where our open enrollment outs and ends are, because obviously there's a lot of people who make applications who don't then do or follow through with those. But we have had a significant, I know we've had our ELL population has grown probably as a percentage greater than our non-ELL population. But obviously that enrollment does help us, although it comes with some staffing concerns and some costs that we added last year.
Overall enrollment is trending flat or still flat?
Pretty much, yeah. Yep.
All right. Any additional questions, discussion for Ron? Okay, then he'd be looking for us to approve his 22-23 preliminary operating budget for the 2022 annual meeting as he presented it, if somebody would like to make that motion. A motion by Cheryl and a second by Terry. Additional conversation or questions? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, so we're on to informational items. Just for boardsmanship, when Fig lets us know where he needs us for referendum discussions, if you're available, please be there to support the administrative team in the community. Anything from administration?
Yeah, just notice that Nikki Austin has achieved level 2 with WSB, and there is going to be a recognition program.
I don't even know what that means.
Congratulations.
I don't know what that means.
So,
It means we don't pay.
so you, I think it's, so you, how long have you been on the board? 7 years?
It'll be, yeah.
So you're
6.
going,
I mean year 6.
okay, so you're completing your second full term?
Yep.
Yeah, so
There's
that's,
a combination usually of like 3 factors. One is how long you've been on the board. 2 is if you've done any PD. And the
points.
third, which may help you a little bit, is if you're on the regional board and or if you're a delegate, I think might also get you some points, So if anybody wants to move up the ladder faster, Nikki, take those roles away from Nikki.
Rich said he'd double my pay,
so there is, the recognition's gonna be at Middleton High School on the evening of September 29th. So I will attend with Nikki and her husband. And if any other board members would like to attend, I just need you to let me know.
Okay. Next item is Board of Education correspondence. We did get one correspondent. It was sent to all board members, so I will likely formulate a response on behalf of the entire board. Committee reports, go down the line. Eric, Dylan,
Policy committee met. We moved two policy changes to future board meeting for the full board to approve in the future.
Terry,
Library board met and we voted in our new member, which we approved tonight. Then also there was some questions brought up by the committee about them moving forward with their remodel, getting bids at the end of this year, possibly starting next year. And I directed those questions to Fig and Rich after the meeting, so.
thank you, Terry. Nikki,
Nothing for me?
Teresa,
Todd and I met last week maybe to talk about curriculum and setting the agenda for the year, and so looking at which Monday will work best for meetings, but having those starting in October.
Tim, Phil, Cheryl.
Nothing, just that we're all looking forward to Tuesdays this weekend, right?
Oh, yes. All right. And Fig's gonna be making cheese curds, right?
I will be making cheese curds.
All right, best cheese curds in Monroe will be made what day?
Sunday from 3 to 6, so after the parade.
All right,
So I heard that's when they needed the most help, so that's when I volunteered.
all right.
Don't eat more than you make, that's the only.
It's hard.
It is hard.
Do they have cameras?
No, they let you eat as many as you want while you're making them, but.
It's quality control.
Keep up.
All right.
Way to get to the front of the line, make them.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. Agenda items for future discussions from any board members? Okay. I didn't see an email from Sam for the liaison report, so did you? Nothing, okay. Media questions, I don't see anybody here from the press. We are gonna go into a closed session tonight. I'm going to go into closed session per Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility to wit discussion of the district administrator's goals on a personnel issue covered under Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren 5. Considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories, or disciplinary data, or specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, a personnel issue. We will adjourn from closed session, so we don't have any business afterwards. I would entertain a motion if somebody would like to make it.
So I'll second.
Got a motion by Nikki and a second by Teresa at 8:28. Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
Nikki Austin, yes. Rich Depre?
Yes.
Eric Ekdahl?
Yes.
Terry Ellison? Yes. Teresa Keen?
Yes.
Cheryl McGuire? Dylan McGuire?
Yes.
Phil Vosberg? Tim Wolf?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.